The first thing to realize when considering offshore banking is that it's very similar to banking down the street. You can view your account online, you can transmit wire transfers in and out of your account. Many offshore banks have debit cards associated with the account that you can use to buy groceries, go clothes shopping, pay bills with your card, etc. Hi, this is the Business Guy, and today we're talking about how to open an offshore bank account. And can you please help me out by clicking the like button below so YouTube promotes this video? Thanks so much. You can text the link of this video to those who need it. And you can also click the subscribe button so that when more videos come out like this, you'll get notified. I've been in the company formation and offshore banking industry since 1991. We have full-time attorneys on our staff, and over a period of 3 decades as of this video, we have built the largest organization in the country and possibly the world that establishes international companies and bank accounts. I've walked down Bahnhofstrasse, the street with the largest number of banks in Switzerland, and have had close relations with Swiss bankers for over 16 years. We have relationships with banks in other parts of Europe, North America, Asia, South and Central America, Australia, Africa, and I personally know the CEO of bankers in the Caribbean and the South Pacific. I've met with multiple prime ministers and premiers around the world, as you can see from pictures on our websites. Now, who you use for your offshore banking needs is very important. After all, this is your money we're talking about. You don't likely drive the cheapest car you can find. You don't want the cheapest offshore services you can find either. For example, you might ask somebody who sets up a Nevis company if there are any taxes due. They might say, no, Nevis is tax-free. What we would say, however, is that there may not be taxes on offshore companies in Nevis, but people in the US, Canada, UK, Australia, and many other countries tax worldwide income regardless of where you earn it, thus saving you possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars in penalties and fees. My purpose with this video is to make the most complete and comprehensive video on offshore banking on the internet. And I hope it informs you, and if needed, gives you the comfort to set up your own offshore bank account. Now let's continue. As you know, a local account does not consist of little pieces of paper currency stuffed into a cubbyhole with your name on it. Your bank account is simply computer data on the bank's network that is backed up on servers around the world. Should you travel to another country on vacation, you will still be able to access your account, withdraw funds, etc. Likewise, your bank account overseas consists of computer code likely backed up on the exact same global computer network as your friendly neighborhood bank. So it does not matter whether you bank down on the corner or on the other side of the planet. Either way, your money is in the same place on a global computer network. Offshore banking safety. With regards to bank safety, keep in mind that there are international financial standards that banks must meet. That is, before a bank can accept depositors from abroad, it must pass certain financial stress tests. For example, before a bank in Belize, Nevis, Cook Islands, Switzerland, or the Cayman Islands can transmit wire transfers in US dollars, it generally needs to obtain a US correspondent bank. Obtaining a correspondent banking relationship carries certain requirements. For example, it must prove to the US institution that its financial strength ratios comply with strict international standards. Moreover, it must continuously pass these tests in order to maintain the relationship. Additionally, there are rigorous government regulations within each one of these jurisdictions. One hard and fast requirement is that banks must maintain substantial capital reserves in order to ensure depositor safety. Moreover, regulators continuously audit the banks. This helps to ensure that the banks remain in compliance and to uphold the reputations of these popular financial centers. There are restrictions on the number, amount, and security required for bank loans and investments, and there are quarterly reporting requirements. Plus, bank officials must pass intensive background checks before they can obtain a directorship with the institution. Banking regulations. There is an international regulatory framework for banks. These are standard to which all banks must comply in order to transmit funds overseas. This includes the Basel III. The Basel III is a detailed set of standards. The Basel Committee on Banking Supervision developed these standards for the industry. Its purpose is to solidify and unify the regulation, supervision, and risk management of the banking industry around the globe. The intent of these measures are to do the following: improve the banking industry's ability to absorb blows stemming from financial and economic stress, regardless of the source. Improve risk management, operations and oversight, strengthen banks' transparency and disclosures. There are international standards for the liquidity coverage ratio and risk monitoring tools that banks must have in place. It accomplishes this by making sure that a banking institution has a sufficient amount of unencumbered, high-quality liquid assets. These are assets the bank can easily and immediately convert into cash. The institutions can turn to private markets in order to meet its liquidity demands for a 30-calendar-day liquidity stress scenario. There's the net stable funding ratio requirements. These standards require banks to keep a secure funding profile for both the short term and the long term. Banking offshore is very common. Over 2.7 million U.S. citizens reportedly have offshore bank accounts. Offshore banking is not just for the top 1%. Offshore banking is available to anyone and everyone wanting to take advantage of the various benefits. Many foreign banks offer low deposit minimums, thus they make for a plausible option to anyone with a desire to set up an offshore account. Moreover, the benefits of having an offshore bank account go way beyond alternative investment opportunities and hiding your assets. These benefits affect the average person and can greatly improve your daily banking experience. In terms of security, accessibility, convenience, and peace of mind, it would seem that offshore banking is the ideal solution. Gone are the days of thinking of foreign banking as some distant idealistic tax evasion scheme to hide your domestic assets from the government. On the contrary, it is legal, moral, and ethical when done properly. Moreover, it is a real, viable, and sustainable option available to all willing to take advantage of it. Why learn more? Many Americans are not aware of what offshore banking really is, but alas, now's the time to start learning the truth about it. Offshore banking is utilization of a banking system in a nation different than one in which you reside, most favorably in a strong, stable jurisdiction. There are numerous financial and legal benefits to banking offshore. This could be due to an economy in the doldrums. It could be due to a poor Federal Reserve System tied to a government that's deeply in debt, such as the U.S. Alternatively, it could be, as was the failure of Washington Mutual, hugely capitalized banks failing the stress tests. Thus, it seems imperative to start examining offshore banking as a legitimate option. With the American and European banking systems over-leveraged at best, you may also want to look at these reasons that we will discuss below. Diversification. Banking offshore offers currency diversification for your savings. This is very useful for maintaining a safe, stable, long-term investment portfolio. Very few domestic banks offer options for holding diverse currencies. Holding assets overseas in different currencies allows one to take advantage of jumps in currency fluctuations. After the 9/11 disaster, I know many people who opened Canadian bank accounts and converted US dollars to Canadian dollars. Many made a handsome 30% profit as the US dollar tanked and the Canadian one strengthened. So holding various currencies can diversify investments and offer a higher return in certain market conditions and lower risks. International markets. International markets allow for diverse flow of income. It is also pertinent to consider that while the U.S. was in a recession in 2008, Asia's market was booming. Limiting your business domestically restricts you. Going offshore can help you take full advantage of the favorable international banking laws. In Switzerland, for example, the banks are also the investment management firms. Swiss banking comes with some of the top money managers in the world, so a financial planner in the institution can suggest a portfolio that offers a great combination of growth and safety. The U.S. limits the number of trades in which a trader can participate. Trading offshore removes that cap. Better interest rates. Banks in the U.S. typically offer very low interest on deposits. For example, at the current market rates, if you deposit $1,000 US in January, you will make less than $10 interest for the year. Some may feel satisfaction or even thrill to make any amount on their savings at all. However, when you compare that to some international banks, you can find some significantly higher interest rates on your deposits offshore. We are talking enough interest to make you set up an offshore account just based on this benefit alone. Locations such as Australia, Switzerland, Netherlands, and France may not only offer great interest rates on your deposits, but they're also listed as home to some of the world's safest banks. Move money quickly. Along with diversifying your assets, having even a small offshore account allows you to move your money quickly. Offshore account holders have the flexibility to move their funds if needed. For example, you may be in a situation where you need asset protection from lawsuits. In addition, you may have regular transactions in international business deals. Along these lines, We also know that domestic banks often keep very limited funds on hand for very large withdrawals. This makes it much harder to readily access all of your money quickly. The challenge is that there are numerous situations where this sort of limitation can be lethal in terms of asset protection. Why is that important? Here's why. What if you cannot withdraw your funds quickly? That is, you may have a lawyer in the line behind you who wants to freeze your account until the bank hands it over. So having an account offshore ties the hands of your opponent. You can quickly move your money and/or have your offshore trustee step in to protect you. Misconceptions. Perhaps a more common misperception of offshore banking is hiding assets from the taxman. In reality, this is rarely true, as offshore banks are typically transparent for tax purposes. That being said, there are some ways to maintain limited privacy when utilizing an offshore account. Any American transporting $10,000 US in cash or more at one time must report it. It is possible to have an account under $10,000 without reporting it. You do, however, need to report if you are a signatory on a foreign account. Nevertheless, we highly recommend you speak with your licensed tax advisor. Countries with the safest banks. Another reason for setting up an offshore bank account is for a more secure banking experience. The Federal Reserve System that backs offshore banks is in turn backed by the most debt-ridden country on the planet. Global Finance magazine, for example, releases a list of the 50 safest banks every year. Guess how many major U.S. national banks were on the most recent list? 1, and it was last place, 50 out of 50. As of this video, the only remaining American banks on the safest list are 4 tiny farming banks, as they list number 35, 44, 46, and 47. That's right, there are 34 banks in the world that are safer than even the safest U.S. bank. According to Global Finance, here are the countries with the safest banks in the world: Germany, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Norway, France, Sweden, Canada, Luxembourg, and South Korea. Of the above countries, only Switzerland and Luxembourg will open accounts without the need to travel to the country. The minimum deposits are substantial, and the banker will eventually come to meet you in person. Internationally, however, it is easy to find banks in low-debt countries that don't and won't gamble with your money. Consequently, they're able to keep more cash on hand for your withdrawals. When you put it in terms of investing, where would you want to park your money? In a company that's swimming in cash, or one that's drowning in debt like the U.S. government is? Countries such as Switzerland and Luxembourg have strict central banking regulations. They implement checks and balances on all bank accounting practices. Many other offshore banks and countries have similar systems. These systems help to ensure that people who are looking to bank offshore can do so safely and soundly. Greater security. Additionally, many asset protection experts say when you bank offshore, you are less attractive to lawsuits domestically. This is especially true when you hold your bank account inside of an offshore LLC, an asset protection trust. That is, if you tie up a chunk of your assets with these structures that hold your offshore accounts, they are much harder for your opponent to seize. Now, this may not be a concern for everyone, but keep in mind it is more difficult for somebody to freeze your accounts in a snap if they are sitting in foreign banks. For long-term security, experts recommend holding your account in an offshore company and/or trust. Holding funds in these tools not only give privacy, they can also offer substantial legal protection if a court order demands repatriation of the funds. Setting up an offshore account. This will likely come as no surprise. It is becoming more and more difficult for Americans to set up offshore accounts. This information is highly pertinent, so it is essential to ask an experienced professional to find the best bank for you. Now, this is a service that our organization provides. We know which banks will accept foreign clients. We are also keen on which banks we feel are the strongest and safest, and which offer the most attractive services. Now, here are some things to look for. Availability for American clients. Now, not all banks will accept American, Canadian, and European clients. Ability to open up an account remotely. There are some overseas banks that have options for clients to open accounts online or over the phone. Naturally, you will also need to provide the legally required Know Your Client documents. Other banks require that you visit their bank directly to open up an account. That said, some of those banks have domestic branches. Therefore, some will allow you to set up your overseas accounts through the local branch. The problem is that U.S. courts have jurisdiction over the local branches. So it is important to use a bank that does not have corresponding U.S. locations. Low minimums. Most banks require a minimum deposit to open up an account, and that goes for domestic and international banks. So you will want to seek a bank with a minimum deposit requirement within reason for you. Banks that have local clients as well as foreign clients. You can rest assured that a bank offering services to locals is going to be well scrutinized. A bank that only has foreign clients is often called a Class B bank. These banks may be more easily overlooked by regulators. Class A banks can typically accept both domestic and foreign depositors. Many banks have strict privacy laws and do not disclose account information. Tax reporting, however, is a different issue. International financial institutions are responsible for filing certain forms for U.S. residents and citizens. Doing so helps them comply with U.S. tax regulations. The responsibility also lies with the account holder to report it properly. When setting up an offshore account, you will also want to keep basic tax laws in mind. It is important to note, by the way, this is meant to be helpful information and not tax advice. It is subject to change, so seek advice from a licensed accountant. That being said, it is recommended that Americans keep the following in mind. U.S. regulations. You must report all worldwide income. This applies even if you pay foreign taxes on your income. Keeping money over yonder and only paying taxes when you bring it back ceased in 1964. Large corporations with broad shareholder bases can get away with this, but not an individual or closely held corporation with U.S. owners. You have to report any foreign bank account exceeding $10,000. This is supplementary to your income report. If you have an offshore account exceeding $10,000, you have to file an FBAR form. Penalties and interest for improperly reporting your taxes. There is no statute of limitations on tax evasion. Penalties can range from $10,000 to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Tax evasion, false reporting, and failure to report may carry stiff penalties, so be sure to comply with all tax laws. Making the right decision. Aside from all that, you also need to bear in mind that no one bank is right for everyone. While some people need highly capitalized banks with easy-to-access withdrawals, others may look for asset protection benefits. Contrary to popular belief, offshore banking isn't about evading taxes or hiding your assets. It's about building your business and securing assets from vexatious litigation. That is, many people simply establish offshore accounts to benefit from favorable international regulations. Safer offshore than onshore. As time goes on, in fact, it seems the question is less, is foreign banking for me, and more, is domestic banking right for me? This isn't some fluke. This is a direct result of a shaky banking system. It is a system backed by a government in debt, a government that is burning through people's money. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve is in shambles. If you think otherwise, compare it with equivalent agencies in countries that are not deep in debt. Certainly, the question is no longer about whether offshore banking is safe. The question we should be asking is this: which secure offshore bank should we use for our personal, legal, and business and financial benefit? Offshore banking allows for increased financial privacy. Many individuals and companies around the world take advantage of these confidentiality benefits. U.S. residents can enjoy the same financial rewards as these people and businesses by banking offshore. Protecting your money from divorce, lawsuits, and legal battles is another reason. You can open offshore bank accounts in the name of offshore companies to provide maximum privacy and security. Offshore bank accounts are not just for the wealthy. There is a distinct rise in the number of Americans who put their money into private financial accounts. The purpose of this video is to provide understanding and information on this subject. Confidentiality of an offshore bank account. Most offshore bank account jurisdictions have strict confidentiality rules and regulations. These are in place to help ensure that the identities of their depositors and investors, as well as related transactions, are confidential. That is, the casual probe or prying eye will not be able to delve into your financial affairs. While this confidentiality is almost legendary, it is not possible to guarantee absolute privacy and anonymity. All financial institutions the world over have implicit legal obligations. As such, they are to report and comply with investigations into suspected serious criminal activity. This, of course, includes terrorism, money laundering, and the fruits of illicit drug trade. However, in the vast majority of instances, there is no compelling criminal accusation, so depositor information is guarded in a jealous fashion. These offshore bank account jurisdictions are designated to provide the utmost in confidentiality and serve to judiciously protect and safeguard depositor information. This high-level confidentiality is especially noteworthy as it relates to protecting assets from domestic litigation. For example, civil matters such as divorce or contested estates are daily battles in the courts. It is not in the bank's best interest to divulge confidential or depositor information. Thus, they have traditionally only done so reluctantly and with certain rigorous tests that a requiring government agency must meet. Any semblance of leaks or breaks in confidentiality would serve to break the confidence of other potential account holders. As such, they would stand to lose a great deal of banking business. Even deeper and tighter levels of anonymity and confidentiality are readily available. One can enhance privacy through asset holding vehicles such as international business companies such as LLCs offshore or offshore trusts. These tools offer mountains of protection compared to simply opening an offshore bank account. Give us a call and our staff attorneys and consultants can discuss them with you further. The goal of anyone looking to open one or more offshore banking accounts should be this: to strike the appropriate balance among asset protection, anonymity, security, and accessibility. It is important to have guidance, so be sure to get a hold of a consultant to find the right solution. More information. Popular jurisdictions for offshore banking exist in various parts of the world. However, it is important to form an offshore company to own your offshore bank account. The jurisdictions that offer the most privacy for the owners of offshore companies are not necessarily in the same jurisdiction as the best offshore banking account providers. One may drive a Mercedes automobile, but that car will not have Mercedes tires. It will more likely bear Goodyear, Firestone, Continental, or Michelin tires. Likewise, you'll want to choose the jurisdiction with the best legal tools. Then you'll want to choose the jurisdiction with the best financial institutions that meet your needs. For example, you can have a company on the island of Nevis and bank in Switzerland. Nevis company law offers the maximum privacy of ownership. Switzerland offers the strongest combination of bank safety and financial privacy. So it is critical to establish the right combination for your specific needs. Join the crowd. Offshorecompany.com is the world authority in offshore services. The organization specializes in financial privacy and asset protection plans for a worldwide audience. The company behind it was established in 1906, and we urge any prospective client to seek the assistance of a trusted offshore services coach. You can contact us by using the phone number or website below. Opening an offshore account provides an alternate and legal option to safeguarding your money, and this company has been there since 1906. Robert Kiyosaki, world-renowned entrepreneur, financial educator, and New York Times best-selling author, said this: "If you want to go somewhere, it is best to find someone who has already been there. When financially successful people speak, it's often wise to listen." As stated above, approximately 2.7 million Americans have their money in offshore accounts. U.S. politicians, wealthy investors, and celebrities alike take advantage of offshore banking opportunities. This number excludes the 7.6 million U.S. citizens living and banking abroad, according to the U.S. State Department. Also not included in this total are the number of U.S. military people living all around the world. So it doesn't matter if you are a U.S. citizen or expatriate living overseas or live in another country. Whatever the reason, most people can legally benefit from having an offshore account. The financially unsavvy U.S. As you know, one domestic financial disaster in the U.S. occurred in 2008. During this time, some of the largest banking institutions went bankrupt. This was due to fraudulent practices perpetrated on the working people of America. It sent shockwaves around the world. Billions of dollars in savings and pensions were lost. The catastrophe left many people broke, having to start over. Who's to say this won't happen again? The COVID pandemic provided another blow to certain sectors of the U.S. economy. And before that, the U.S. stock market crashed in 2000. This was otherwise known as the dot-com bubble, as you recall. Then there was that famous day on October 19th, 1987. We call that date Black Monday, as it was the biggest one-day financial meltdown in American history. It resulted in over $500 billion vanishing from the markets. Prior to that, the largest well-known financial pandemic was the Great Depression in 1929. Added to this are the many recessions between now and then that have ravaged the finances of millions of Americans. Moreover, the U.S. is by far the most debt-ridden country in the world. As the interest on the national debt skyrockets, the odds of many more financial catastrophes in the United States do too. This includes the collapse of banks that your money may be in. So don't rely on the FDIC to bail you out. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation is a United States government corporation providing deposit insurance to depositors in U.S. banks. The only problem is that, yes, it is backed by the most in-debt country on the planet. Do what the rich and informed do. It is widely known that diversifying your financial portfolio is the right way to go. Putting your money into stocks, mutual funds, index funds, and real estate are only a few options for the average American. But if all those investments are in the USA, they can be pulled down the same sinkhole. In the event of another U.S. financial collapse, investments can shrink to a fraction of their original value. What if there are other investment options? What if there are more ways to invest, safeguard, and diversify your financial portfolio? Moreover, what if you had the added bonus of having the utmost confidentiality of your investments? That is where offshore banking comes in. To prove just how substantial the offshore bank account market is, over $32 trillion have been placed in offshore accounts. Savvy investors realize that the U.S. is not and has not been the go-to place to secure their money. And as we have said above, according to Global Finance, the list of the 50 safest banks in the world, the U.S. ranks number 35, 44, 46, 47, and 50. The tiny farming banks, AgriBank, CoBank, AgFirst, and Farm Credit Bank of Texas, and finally, U.S. Bank, are the only American banks that made the list. The banks that most U.S. citizens use for finance, Chase, Citi, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, are nowhere on the list. Makes you think. Making less interest on your money than the annual inflation rate erodes it. Taking risky chances to invest blindly in the stock market is hardly a way in which you can reach your financial goals. The dying American dream. Chances are that you work really hard every day. You may own a business, pay bills, act in a financially responsible fashion. The money you have left over and save and attempt to invest in the stock market is your nest egg. That is your retirement and your dream to a better life. And at any time, greedy lawyers may freeze your bank account and render your funds inaccessible. Perceived issues with the IRS, divorce, unpaid medical bills, child support issues, or any judgment against you can result in having your bank accounts ripped out from underneath you. Even marrying and potentially divorcing has proven to result in financial disaster that many may not recover from. Why? Because all of your assets may be in the U.S. As such, they are visible and susceptible to judgments and confiscation, leaving you in the poorhouse. Ending a marriage is emotionally painful, yes, but it also devastates people financially. Divorce proceedings can take years to conclude. One can squander tens of thousands or even millions of dollars, and later it can leave you with a mere fraction of what you have built. Being financially conscious of this fact provides yet another reason. It is another reason to allocate some of your money to an offshore account with strong legal tools. Therein, you can keep your money out of harm's way. So opening an offshore account gives you the freedom to keep your money private and not susceptible to domestic moochers. Positive financial outlook. The media has commonly referred to offshore accounts as tax shelters or tax havens. In the past, the IRS did not heavily scrutinize money invested offshore. Because now there are so many advantages to investing money offshore, the IRS has made it harder for those looking to seek financial benefits, and the IRS wants its share. So in 2009, the Congress passed the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, or FATCA. It stated, as before, that U.S. citizens living abroad need to file their taxes with the IRS. What was new, however, was that financial institutions abroad needed to reveal their U.S. clients who bank with them. The country that got most of the news in this regard was Switzerland. The Swiss bank account had and still has tremendous notoriety. Switzerland is a great country in which to invest or save money. It is known for banking safety and a plethora of investment options. These regulations turned out to be a godsend. That is because it is almost foolish for somebody to accuse a U.S. person of offshore tax evasion. When the bank they used is obligated to report, tax evasion is much less of an issue. Thus, it makes compliance by U.S. people much easier. Choices. There are dozens of other countries in addition to Switzerland to invest your money. Please note that it is perfectly legal to bank in offshore accounts. U.S. citizens need to report their offshore profits to the IRS. This is a simple layer of due diligence for you to do during tax seasons. But also note that CPAs and attorneys who understand offshore banking tax regulations can help. Those well versed in these new laws will walk you through the simple reporting process. Keeping all of your money in the U.S. banking system nowadays may not be the safest option. We are told that the U.S. has 96% of the world's lawsuits and 80% of the world's lawyers. Some lawyer walks into a bank with a judgment in hand and your money is gone in a moment's notice. So keeping some money offshore may be a wise fortress for financial survival. Getting started. Opening up an offshore account is not difficult. However, there are new laws and hoops to jump through, as well as a number of offshore banks who do not accept U.S., Canadian, or Australian depositors. So it is highly recommended to seek a company that is experienced with the ins and outs of offshore banking. Are you interested in finding out more? If so, we're here to help. There's a consultation form on our website at offshorecompany.com that you can complete right now. You can call 1-661-253-3303. Feel free to take advantage of these opportunities and reach out for help. Please click like and subscribe below. Thank you. This is The Business Guy.